and good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all of you to the EdTech Lounge on behalf of the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning. So today's EdTech Lounge, our presenter today is Veronica Sarrungi, who's a lecturer at the Institute for Educational Development, Tanzania. Veronica has an MEd in teacher education from IED Tanzania. She also has a master's degree in computer programming. Veronica's areas of teaching are fundamentals of classical logic and ICT in education. She's interested in mathematics education, special learning needs in mathematics, education as part of her research. She is a member of Mathematics Association of Tanzania and also a member of Special Interest Group in Mathematics and Science Education. So I invite Veronica to the EdTech Lounge session. And so welcome, Veronica, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Azra, and thank you, Blended Digital Learning Network, for this opportunity. So my session today will be around building social connections in an online environment when maintaining physical distancing. And as I start, I would like us to reminisce a little bit about the time before COVID-19. And I would like you to share in the chat window, what is one thing you miss most about working from the office? Or what do you miss most about teaching face-to-face? So just quickly, in about 1 minute, if people would like to share that. Okay, I can see Tashmin, thank you, and Zia Ul Islam. Yes, so I think most of us miss the actual contact. But we do not have, somehow this eye-to-eye contact or physical connections is not there. Azra has also pointed out that somehow the day never ends. So while in the office we could switch off and go home, here we cannot do it. SP says we miss the interaction with the students. Yes, and so this was one thing that made me think at the beginning, and I actually only thought about myself and missing interactions with students. But later on, I came to realize that I also miss interaction with my colleagues. Now, one thing from my in my title, I had decided consciously to use the word physical and not social distancing, because I remember at one time at the beginning of this whole lockdown, we were urged not to use social distancing because of possible misinterpretation, because actually we needed to be more social and emotionally connected rather than we only needed physical distancing, but not social distancing. So sometimes the term social distancing can be misleading. Of course, I know in health it means something else, but there was a call to be aware that we need to be socially connected. So a quick outline, I will just share a little bit about the background and then how I became aware and what I tried to do about the implementations, and then reflections, and I would also like us to think together about the possible future as we go into the new normal. So what happened? We went from a time when students were seated around a table and they would all do things hands-on and have a chat, to literally within a week, sitting in front of a computer and looking at the screen. And beside that, a lot of uncertainty. So some of our students were in lockdown. We ourselves were working from home. The connections were not good. And so this is what happened. And I don't need to tell everybody because I think we all have lived through this. What is surprising is my awareness about social interaction or the importance of this didn't start immediately. The first time I became aware was when I was planning for semester 2. And that was after 2 weeks of teaching online for the first semester. So as I was planning for my virtual learning environment, I was asked and said, have you thought of social interactions? And actually I had not. So thanks to Kuram and Misaba for pointing this out. And so I started to think, and they told me, but do you remember when you were teaching, you would go into class and find them talking, or you would walk out of class and they would still be talking. So I started thinking of how I could factor social interactions on, and of course I was thinking about VLE. But the other awareness that became was my own personal experience. So what happened was we used to have faculty meetings on Zoom, and gradually, we sort of started to get used to the new normal. We would either join earlier and have informal chats before the formal start, or we would tend to stay behind, especially when we knew the recording was not on, and start to talk about other issues. And so this made me aware about the importance of social connections. And so how did I try to implement it? One way was through Moodle, the asynchronous way. And so in the courses that I was responsible for, or which I co-facilitated, I tried to create a space for social interaction. So for example, in mathematics education here, I put up a little video so that they could also see me, but it was so strange because I couldn't see them. It was also a way for them to try out features of Moodle, and I encouraged them to use this space for social connections. And so they could post any issue, but also, as I said here, social discussions. For ICT in education, this is on the right, a whole section was dedicated for social space. And one forum was about bringing a message of positivity. And I would like to say a special thanks once again to BDLNet, because when we were doing the training, this is how they also started during chat. And I found it really uplifting. And so I thought maybe this would be a good way to introduce also students to the new features, because then they could send video and audio messages. However, what happened was that in mathematics, out of 7, only one person posted, and she posted twice, with only one reaction for one of her posts. And similarly, in the social space for ICT in education, which was taken by 58, only about 20 people posted, some audio, some video, and a few posted a text, but there was very few reactions. And I did not want to interfere, and so I didn't take the discussion forward. I didn't react to it, and so it sort of fizzled out, and that's where it ended. This social space is still the same way it is. What was more successful was having some social time after the formal synchronous session. So what would happen is at the end, we would have like, is there any other question? And it would gradually tend to go to social connections or social issues. And I would also like to acknowledge my colleagues with whose session I sat in, because they would do the same, and so I would also implement it in my sessions. But what was really important was once I was facilitating a session for the whole cohort, and it ran over time a little bit. And then one of them said, could we please hear from our class representative? And I was like, but you know, this is a lot of time now. It's already 1 hour. We've run over time. And they were like, no, we want to stay behind and talk. This is important for us. And so I said, okay, do you want me to stay or go? And they said, would you mind if you go out? And I'm like, okay. And I went out. And so this made me realize that, oh, so that we need to make it more formal, even in synchronous sessions. And this was sort of a good thing, because the same week, just a couple of days later, a colleague of mine, we were facilitating a tutorial in the afternoon. And so what we did, we had about 1.5 hours, and we gave about 40 minutes for socializing. This is actually taken from the description of that day. And so we told them that you have 40 minutes for socializing. This is optional. You can join or not, and this part won't be recorded. And we even informed IT that they will be moderating, so they were given co-hosting rights. And what we discovered was most of them joined. So we actually joined at 2:20, and we told them that we won't be there. And we found them discussing, of course, their issues, but also just having fun and saying, oh, I didn't see you, and how are you doing, and sort of catching up. Later on, this was also formalized. For example, before course sessions, rather than starting with a facilitator input and then going into breakout rooms, the course participants would first go into breakout rooms. So when they would log in, they would immediately be taken into the small breakout rooms. and they would discuss. This actually only worked for a smaller course, the mathematics education, because there were only 7, and it was easier to put them in groups, and they would discuss issues that were interesting to them. For example, they had something around equity, but they also discussed something related to their research and other issues. Again, I was not part of it, so they could tell me what they wanted or not. And finally, there was one session, and I would like to again acknowledge my co-facilitators for ICT in education, which was a completely peer-led session. And so the course participants were put into different groups depending on a task they had, and they were allowed to ask for separate Zoom meetings, and they decided when they wanted to have the Zoom meeting to discuss how they were doing their resources. And also they had a forum, but the surprising thing again was there was less activity on the forum. They did post a little bit, and more activity for the actual Zoom meeting. So what are some of the reflections based on these experiences? So as I was trying to think of how or what could I understand, how I could understand this whole experience, I found the community of inquiry framework, which I believe was also shared previously in some of the EdTech lounges. And this one talks about the 3 presences, the social presence, the cognitive presence, the teaching presence. And I found it useful because while we're looking at the social presence, it also talks about how it influences or how the other 2 presences are important. So one of my first reflections was that in reality, it wasn't building social connections, it was sustaining the connections. Because these students had already interacted for more than 3 months, or about 3 months, face-to-face. And so it was a matter of continuing those connections. The other thing that I sort of came to realize was that the role of the facilitator is very important. And so in the asynchronous mode, when I was doing the VLE, perhaps I should have had more presence, maybe just sort of just saying, well done, or thank the people for sharing, because I think taking too much a backseat maybe also was the reason why the whole thing fizzled out. I'm not sure, but I think this is my take on it. What I also realized is during synchronous sessions, formalization was very important. So the fact that there was time dedicated either before or after or during was an important factor. And again, this is in the teaching presence. It is through design and implementation. So I think that designing the synchronous sessions in such a way that there was an opportunity for socializing or just connecting was very important. However, as I think, I realized that there is a need to be more sensitive. For example, some of the students could not connect because of connectivity. All of us have faced this problem. So although we did try as IED East Africa to provide them with data bundles, sometimes the broadband just wasn't there. Sometimes there was no power to the point that all their phones and everything went off. And so some would write and say, oh, I wish I could continue, but my laptop is going to go off soon. And so in this case, I think I could have been more sensitive, or how do we square this? That some people could not connect and so they could not engage. We did put up the Zoom later on, the recording, but they did not benefit from the actual social interaction. And of course, technological proficiency. So the people who actually posted in the asynchronous mode were those who could figure out how to use Moodle for video and audio, and others really struggled because for others, even finding how to post was difficult. Again, maybe this was a barrier and it should be something to consider. So before I end, I would like us to just quickly, for maybe 1 minute, think about the future. So I know some of us have already welcomed a new cohort. Some of us are looking forward to welcoming a new cohort in about 5 to 6 months. So what are some of our thoughts on social presence? If you could please share in the chat window. Okay, so thank you, Zia. So the question is, as you look forward to welcoming a new cohort, some of us have already welcomed a new cohort in this new normal. What are some of your thoughts on social presence? Yes. Thank you, Anil. So Sheila has written that research suggests that positive interaction between educational personnel and students increase overall student persistence. And this is actually true. So in the sense that as students interact with each other and the faculty, there's a connection, they would tend not to give up. And I think that in this setting, especially when students were under a great pressure, I think this was very useful to have the social connection. Yes. And so Anil has said that we actually need to have a lot of pre-sessional activities to build cohort identity. And I agree, because when we come to think about it, these were people we knew or they knew each other. But what about when we are going to have people who might not have met face-to-face before? We would need to have extra work. And as Jane is saying, we need to put it into our planning to how to sort of strengthen this social connection. And I think, Zia, you're pointing out the very right thing, that it's good to have the camera. I was also somehow not very, I was shy or not willing, but I discovered that students just loved having the camera. Sometimes they would even ask, can we switch on? And I would actually like to acknowledge one of my colleagues who always do that at the end. Let us switch on our cameras and let us see everybody. And students would be so happy, and then they would go into some discussion. So, as I said, these are some of my things, and I think we've just said that it is not impossible, just difficult to build social presence. And I think Anil has rightly pointed out that if we have pre-sessional tasks, this might be very useful. The other one is there's multiple ways to facilitate social presence. So we can do it asynchronously or synchronously. I think this is one of the things we have to think about. I think we all have to be very, very flexible. Just as we adapted in this situation, I think we also need to adapt in the new situation, the new normal. But I would like to end with a positive note. I'm very convinced that we shall emerge stronger after this. So thank you very much.